In the heart of West Africa lies Burkina Faso, a nation that for decades has been known less for its military battles and more for an unrelenting struggle with hunger. It was not a conflict fought with guns or tanks, but one fought with empty stomachs and parched fields. For too long, hunger defined the destiny of millions in this landlocked country. Then came a leader, a young soldier turned head of state, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who looked at the crisis from an entirely different angle. To him, the greatest weakness of his country was not the size of its army, nor the number of weapons it could muster. The true vulnerability, he said, lay in the land. The soil was fertile, but it was betrayed by the skies. Rainfall was irregular, and without water, the land could not feed its people. And when a country cannot feed itself, it must beg or borrow, buying food at great cost or pleading for foreign donations. In that dependence, Traoré saw chains disguised as charity, chains that pulled Burkina Faso away from freedom. He declared that a nation unable to feed its people was a nation still enslaved, even if its laws proclaimed independence. True freedom, he argued, could only come from food sovereignty. From the start, his message was sharp, almost provocative. A dog on a leash, he warned, still walks where its master commands. In the same way, a country that survives on food aid is at the mercy of donors. With that metaphor, he made his point clear. Burkina Faso must learn to feed itself. Guns would not secure that freedom. Water would. Traoré put forward a radical vision, one that contrasted sharply with the policies of past governments. For years, leaders across the Sahel had been encouraged, sometimes coerced into taking out loans from foreign banks, hiring foreign contractors, and hosting glossy development projects that often failed to reach those most in need. They were grand on paper, slow to deliver, and usually benefited outsiders more than the hungry. Traoré broke with that tradition. He told his people and the world that liberation would not come from air-conditioned conference halls in Paris or Washington, but from the fields of Burkina Faso, where dry land awaited water. The urgency of this vision was sharpened by the climate itself. Burkina Faso sits in the Sahel, a belt of land that has become a front line of climate change. Droughts have grown harsher, rains shorter, and every year the threat of famine loomed larger. The old playbook was simple. When hunger struck, ask for help. Shipments of grain from abroad would arrive too late or too little, and the cycle of dependence deepened. Traoré refused to wait for the next famine to prove him right. He launched his campaign immediately. It shocked many abroad, who were accustomed to African leaders extending their hands for aid. Instead, here was a leader saying, "We will do it ourselves." And with that declaration, water became more than a resource. It became a weapon of resistance, the foundation of a new kind of war for independence. At the heart of this vision was a project with both symbolic and practical power: the restoration of the Goulet Dam and the creation of a vast irrigation canal system. Once water was stored, the challenge became deciding where it should flow first. Traoré chose the Bama Plains, a decision that carried deep meaning. The plains were paradoxical, soil rich with nutrients, yet cursed by unrelenting droughts. Past governments had promised to revive Bama, but never delivered. The region became a symbol of betrayal, a land of lost potential. To direct water there was to resurrect hope, to redeem broken promises, and to show that even the most forgotten lands could bloom again. It was a message not only to the people of Bama, but to the entire nation. Nothing is beyond saving. Thus began the carving of the Bama Canal. This canal was not conceived as a modest improvement. It was designed to be the longest irrigation canal in Africa, carrying lifeblood across thousands of hectares. Plans called for rice cultivation across 1,260 hectares, vegetables on an additional 70, and even more expansions already in the works. But the true revolution lay not in the numbers, but in the method. Normally, such a project would have been outsourced to foreign corporations who would fly in engineers, ship in machinery, and drain millions in profits back overseas. Traoré rejected that model. The Bama Canal would be built by Burkinabe hands for Burkinabe people. Local engineers, local workers, local urgency. The pride of the project would be national ownership, and the government set itself an astonishing deadline: 8 months. No endless years of red tape, no donor-driven delays. Hunger could not wait. Independence could not wait. The work began before sunrise, continued under floodlights at night, and carried the intensity of a military operation. Delays were treated not as inconveniences, but as setbacks for the entire nation. For the farmers of Bama, this canal was nothing short of resurrection. Families who had abandoned their land in despair were now returning. Dignity returned with the water. The project was not a crude trench, but a modern system. Solar-powered pumps replaced diesel engines, precision valves regulated flow, and digital sensors promised efficiency never seen before in the region. Surrounding infrastructure grew alongside the canal: warehouses for storage, roads to carry produce to markets, and distribution centers strategically placed, not for political showcase, but for practical need. For the first time, decisions were being made locally. The canal became more than a construction project. It became a living blueprint for how Burkina Faso could transform itself. The implications extended beyond farming. Every drop of water coursing through the canal carried not just fertility for the soil, but power for the nation. For decades, Burkina Faso's food system had been hostage to global markets and donor politics. A drought in Asia, a war in Europe, a trade restriction halfway around the globe, any of these could starve Burkinabe families. Food prices could soar overnight, and foreign donors could use food as leverage for political compliance. With the Bama Canal, the government estimated an additional 50,000 tons of food production annually. But more important than tons was control. Food sovereignty meant Burkina Faso would set its own prices, protect its cultural diets, and say no to aid tied to conditions. Farming was no longer an afterthought. It was now treated as national security. The transformation was visible across society. Farmers, once gamblers on rainfall, now planned multiple harvests a year. Crop rotation preserved the soil. Women's cooperatives, historically relegated to the poorest lands, now gained access to fertile irrigated plots, altering the balance of economic power. Markets stabilized as local food flowed year-round, pushing down prices and easing inflation. Families found themselves with money to invest in education, healthcare, and small enterprises. Each bag of locally grown rice represented a step away from dependency. And in the midst of all this, Burkina Faso was embracing technology once reserved for wealthy nations. Drones surveyed crops, artificial intelligence optimized irrigation schedules, and soil sensors guided farmers in ways unimaginable a generation ago. This marriage of tradition and modernity multiplied the impact of every liter of water. Yet perhaps the most profound change was not in the fields, but in the people themselves. The canal created more than 2,000 direct jobs, and with them came pride. Welders, engineers, masons, and technicians all saw their work not just as employment, but as participation in nation building. Traoré refused the common African model of importing expertise and exporting profits. Instead, he insisted on local supply chains. Cement, steel, machinery, logistics, all sourced domestically. Money stayed within Burkina Faso, circulating through small businesses, banks, and cooperatives. The canal became an economic artery, pumping life into the broader body of the nation. Vocational schools sprang up near the site, teaching trades that would last far beyond the project: hydraulics, solar technology, agribusiness. A new generation of skilled workers was being born, no longer forced to migrate to cities or abroad in search of survival. They stayed because they saw a future worth building. This was not a story of charity, but of empowerment. The ripple effects reached even further. For many workers, this was the first time they had seen a government project that delivered tangible results without being siphoned away by corruption or bureaucracy. Paychecks replaced promises. Cement replaced speeches. In turn, the government earned something priceless: trust. This trust was not blind loyalty, but confidence built on results. Traoré had set an audacious 8-month deadline, and as progress advanced visibly, his gamble in the discipline and skill of his people was vindicated. The project site became not just a workplace, but a symbol. It was a school of resilience, a factory of pride, and a testament that Burkina Faso's future was not for sale. Beyond the borders, the implications were equally significant. A food-secure Burkina Faso could not be bullied with grain shipments or donor conditions. It could negotiate on equal terms. And as surplus food was sold to neighbors struggling with their own droughts, Burkina Faso gained not just revenue, but respect. This was soft power in its purest form, not built on tanks or treaties, but on onions, rice, and dignity. Each harvest strengthened its sovereignty. Each shipment to neighbors strengthened its influence. The Bama Canal had started as a trench in dry earth, but what flowed through it was independence. Perhaps the greatest transformation was psychological. Hunger robs not only the body, but also the spirit. For generations, many Burkinabe had grown accustomed to seeing themselves as beggars in the global order. Now they saw themselves as builders. The narrative of dependence was being rewritten into one of ownership. A 2-3-year-old welder, once unemployed in the capital, now spoke not of poverty but of pride, of sending money home, of shaping steel for his nation, of being, in every sense, a nation builder. Across the site, similar stories multiplied. Masons who became entrepreneurs, farmers who became leaders of cooperatives, women who became economic decision makers in their families. This was more than economics. It was a spiritual rebirth. And so, in Burkina Faso, the war against hunger is being fought not with foreign donations, but with local hands, not with aid convoys, but with irrigation canals. It is being fought in the clatter of cement mixers at dawn, in the careful calculations of young engineers, in the laughter of farmers returning to fields once abandoned, and in the confidence of a nation that no longer bows for bread. What began as water flowing into Bama has become a torrent of change, economic, political, cultural, and deeply human. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's vision is not merely about a canal. It is about rewriting destiny, proving that dignity can be built like a dam, one stone at a time, until a nation once chained by hunger can finally stand free.